Kyle Kulinski. Oh, you should have seen me coming. I've been on a warpath with Kyle Kulinski, host of Secular Talk, also speaks on Crystal Kyle and Friends. You know, guy about leftist town, so to speak, when it comes to, you know, leftist commentary. He's a heavy hitter. He founded Justice Democrats, one of the co-founders of that. And so he's done important things on the left, don't get me wrong, but he has continually held his neck out for Joe Rogan, a transphobe and a bigot who profusely says that he isn't taking any sides, that he just cares about reason and rational thinking, while at the same time disproportionately inviting on conservatives and Republicans who try to bend Joe Rogan's worldview. Because again, Republicans know what they're doing when it comes to media manipulation. They know that by going on Joe Rogan's show, they're reaching an audience, not just Joe Rogan, not just young Jamie, but all of Joe Rogan's diehard fans who don't think that much about politics, who see themselves as apolitical or not very political, who are very slowly, easily, week in, week out, 3 hours at a time, being spoon-fed, dumbed down right-wing propaganda about economic issues, about social issues, about legal issues, especially as it comes to terms with trans issues and with medical issues, just COVID-19. And so Kyle Kulinski is covering a video and again has been covering for Joe Rogan constantly over these past couple of months now, saying, oh, he's actually still on the right. Okay, he says this right-wing thing here, this right-wing thing there, but ultimately he's an agreeable person. He's not turning into a right-winger. You need to stop. I hate all these speaking as Kyle Kulinski, he hates all these leftists who will pile on, essentially subtweeting me, who will pile on to him and pile on to others, saying that Joe Rogan isn't part of the left. Kyle Kulinski's about to eat some humble pie. We're about to watch it together, and I am not going to hold back because this is some well-deserved shit. This is some shit Kyle needs to hear, and maybe if I get more bombastic about it, he'll start paying attention.
All right, guys, I got a little bonus clip here for you.
Let's speed it up a bit.
Forgive my
So again, through here, Kyle is kind of going through Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers doing code misinformation, which is what Joe Rogan has been doing all during the pandemic. And Kyle Kulinski has gone, okay, listen, this is fine. This is hurting a lot of leftists. This is hurting a lot of people who are on my side, who are talking about how dangerous COVID-19 is for people who get it and then develop long COVID, as we were just learning about the beginnings of right then, and we're learning about the ramifications every single day as we speak, and people who are immunocompromised, who do not benefit at all from getting COVID. Joe Rogan tossed them aside, didn't care, said, hey, exercise more, fatties. That was Joe Rogan's response to the COVID-19 pandemic most of the time. Was that if you're able-bodied and you're doing okay all right and you're exercising fine, it's just people with comorbidities who are already unhealthy from eating too much who are the problem.
Either they really thought they were doing the right thing, or there's some coordinated plan.
Coordinated plan. Okay, what would the plan be? What would the incentive be to purposely shut down the entire country, close all the businesses? Do you think this is what the elites want? Is this some sort of like nod to the idea of the Great Reset or like Agenda 21 or some shit? Obviously, this was all based on incompetence. Obviously, the FDA and the CDC and the World Health Organization had no fucking clue.
Kyle Kulinski's continually trying to rationalize and reason with COVID denialism, and he's walked himself into the circle because an issue with Kyle Kulinski's punditry is that it's awfully lazy, it's incredibly naive, and he gives too much benefit of the doubt to bad faith actors because they've been nice to him in the past. I think that's the case for Joe Rogan pretty clearly. Even his audience sees it. My last video was his, I was barely doing the dunking. it was Kyle Kulinski's own audience dunking on Kyle Kulinski for being a Joe Rogan sellout.
That wouldn't benefit anybody.
It's somewhere in the middle.
I don't think there's a coordinated plan. I think people were trying
I'm just saying
to,
what people think, right?
Well, I have a friend, and his brother works for the COVID
I'm just saying what people think. Many people are saying this.
response, whatever it is, in California. And you remember when they had made a decision to close outdoor dining, and it turned out that one of the people that made that decision, the day she did it, went out and was dining outdoors?
I thought you meant Gavin Newsom going to French Laundry.
Yeah, so they're going to talk about, oh, well, we can't trust the people who are doing this. Oh, whatever, blah, 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 blah. We can't trust the Democrats on lockdowns and things like that because they forced people to shut down their businesses and shut down their stores and lose everything they had for this virus and this pandemic, which, first of all, that's what the Paycheck Protection Program, which Joe Rogan took money from, by the way. That's what it was for, to make sure businesses, and a lot of those loans were forgiven, by the way, but it was to make sure those businesses were still able to keep going during those times. So, of course, a lot of businesses still suffered, even whether they got those loans or not. So, I can't blame Democrats on that, though, but I blame the pandemic. That's, if you kept those businesses open, people would have died. And then that would have been a cost to the country because there would have been funeral costs, or there would have been generations of people who would have been set back by having to pay funeral costs because those funeral costs would have been disproportionately placed on the working class, who would have had to deal with maskless idiot saps like Joe Rogan and Aaron Rodgers, who care about their convenience more than the safety of workers. And for people like Kyle Kulinski, who, when I pointed out how anti-worker Joe Rogan is, I made a video, my first video talking about all this stuff, was talking about how Kyle Kulinski missed an opportunity to point out how rise in train thefts happening in Los Angeles are thefts along the freight cars that are going, the trains that go from the port of Los Angeles all throughout the country. That those were more likely to be the result of that freight company firing workers than the result of people in Los Angeles, you know, just going crazy and deciding to steal train cars all the time. Again, missed opportunity from Kyle Kulinski, the Rogan whisperer, who says, you know, Joe Rogan's actually a leftist, guys. Trust me, trust me, trust me. So then you have this situation here where he's continuing to say all this nonsense about how, and I'm just summing up this video, this part of the video here so I can get the meaty parts of it. Continuing to say this stuff about how, oh, no, Joe Rogan, you're wrong. It's not just all Democrats who are behind the lockdowns, but you're continuing to perpetuate this information here. It leads up to this point here where it really just breaks Kyle Kulinski's heart here for whatever reason, because he's the last person to figure this out.
Parasailing or something? No, he was surfing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was surfing. The Coast Guard.
You're out there by yourself.
Yeah.
On a surfboard.
They're supposed to be stopping terrorists.
He's passing COVID to the dolphins or what? Come on. What are we doing?
It's so dumb. But, you know, I hope there's lessons learned in this because this is a new thing.
So the idea of, like, I hope there's lessons learned in this. I'm going to reiterate this again because it's the most important point. Nobody's talking about lockdowns. Nobody's proposing lockdowns. Nobody's doing lockdowns. We never had a federal or national level lockdown in this country. The original lockdown started under a Republican president, Donald J. Trump. And, you know, just to show you how far we've come on this, I mean, this video here is from a while ago. And look at what Biden says.
My team at the White House will provide me with daily updates this week. On Thursday, I'll be putting forward a detailed strategy outlining how we're going to fight COVID this winter, not with shutdowns or lockdowns.
Not with shutdowns or lockdowns. At no point did Biden ever embrace any semblance of a shutdown or a lockdown. And, you know, national level Democrats, same thing. The political consensus is now, hey man, this isn't the way to go about this. It's like in other countries, it's more politically viable to a certain extent. Other countries are more open to that. In the US, seemingly everybody hated it. And the numbers are overwhelming. So again, this concern of like, well, I hope people learn lessons. I hope there's not like more lockdowns coming. Well, you know, victory. You won on that shit. There's no doubt about it.
Never had this before. No one who is alive today had ever experienced a true pandemic. And I'm hoping that now that this is over, people are going to, recognize that some serious errors were made and not repeat those. That's the best you can get out of it. But as far as compensation for all those people that were forced to close their businesses and keep their doors shuttered and lost everything that they'd worked for decades to build, no, they're just going to be angry.
So what do you tell those people?
Now, as far as compensation goes for small businesses, that was the whole idea around the PPP loans. That was the whole idea. Now, a lot of that went to big business as well, which is definitely something
that's what I was
debatable
saying.
at best. I tend to oppose it. I mean, look at the airline bailout. They gave billions of dollars to the airlines under the assumption, hey, you can't lay off anybody. Then the airlines took the money and laid people off anyway, right? But in terms of like bailing out small business at the time, it's something everybody supported. And so there was legislation that was passed to sort of ameliorate the ills around the lockdowns as it pertains to small businesses. So there was an attempt to redress those grievances.
No, they're just going to be angry.
So what do you tell those people?
Vote Republican.
Now that is the definition, Joseph, of a shit-eating grin, my man. That's what that is right there. Vote Republican. He says vote Republican. Let me ask you a question. These Republicans? House Republicans cast 157 votes against same-sex marriage, against protecting same-sex marriage. Now, the reason why they have this vote is because when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, Clarence Thomas, in his decision, said, well, next we should look at Obergefell, which is gay marriage. So that's Clarence Thomas saying in no uncertain terms, we need to throw out the right to gay marriage. Clarence Thomas also referenced the right to contraception. Well, guess what? They had a vote in the House on protecting the right to contraception as well. What was the result? 195 Republicans vote against right to birth control and condoms. Only 8 Republicans supported the bill as Democrats call out the GOP's assault on women's rights. They're against the right to gay marry. They're against the right to birth control and condoms. I'm just curious. Are these the Republicans that we're talking about voting for? Are these the Republicans? Because if you ask Joe Rogan, hey man, what are your thoughts on gay marriage? He says, I'm 100% in favor. If you ask Joe Rogan the question, hey, do you think people have a right to birth control, like the pill or condoms? My guess is he'd give you an emphatic yes. Well, the elected officials in this party are...
At what point, Kyle Kulinski, are you going to stop giving him the benefit of the doubt? Because, yeah, there was that one case where Joe Rogan was, like, asking... It was a recent interview where he was, like, asking one of his guests, oh, so are you saying that you would have my teenage daughter accept the pregnancy of her rapist? When you have a big, bustling Joe Rogan who's having you on his show ask you that question, it made the guy kind of, like, double back a little bit in that kind of interview right there. But here's the issue. Joe Rogan likes to play with the idea that he's not the political guy. He just happens to have the show. Leave him alone, blah, 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 right? But he also admits that, okay, I have more political guests on because it's kind of what people like. It's kind of red meat for my audience. And, you know, he likes cosplaying as a political pundit. Fine, sure. At a certain point, you're going to have to live with your jokes, live with where it comes home to roost, right? And the actual consequences of voting Republican in this case are like the things that Kyle Kulinski is pointing out here. Which brings me to you, Kyle Kulinski. You're a political person. You're smarter than this. You come from this world, you read all this stuff all the time. Apparently you got Rogan on speed dial, you got Rogan's number or whatever. I know you don't want to be pushy or message him too much, but you're the one who's been sticking your neck out for the guy. So now it's time for the neck to get cut, brother, because you can tell it in his voice when he's doing this rest of the thing, and I'll keep playing it more here, but Kyle's down bad. Like, he feels really like he messed this one up. Like, he has been going out to bat for Joe Rogan, doing video after video with Crystal Ball, saying how he's one of the most reasonable people ever. I actually mocked that in my original video on Power Report. Crystal Ball saying, it's hard to think of a more reasonable person than Joe Rogan. The one who wants to vote for Ron DeSantis? There's a certain point where you have to go, okay, you know, Joe Rogan's not smart enough to understand the ramifications of his actions as a host, or his recommendations as a host, or what he's saying, or that, oh, I can support Ron DeSantis for COVID reasons that ultimately have nothing to do except for me and my ability to do comedy shows with my fans. I'll leave it there. Because, as was obvious to people who are actually directly affected by these things, Kyle, as was obvious to people who aren't insulated white dudes in upstate New York, Kyle, is that Joe Rogan does not give a fuck about marginalized communities. And that's damned obvious because of the things he's willing to look over. Because at a certain point, you do this job for a while enough, you say you're in front of a microphone speaking truth to power, it's about understanding the bigger picture for what those communities represent. Unlike Kyle Kulinski, who is a sham, who is not only willing to let his friendship with Joe Rogan get the best of him and influence his coverage and telling people on the left or who was purported to be on the left to trust a phony and a grifter like Joe Rogan, but to also do the same with Jimmy goddamn Dore, whose dad's a cop, by the way. Because Kyle Kulinski took Jimmy's side when it came out that Anna was being sexually harassed by Jimmy, and Jimmy just admitted it. He said, yeah, of course I did it. And by the way, the joke wasn't that bad. And by the way, it was funny. And by the way, your students laughed at it. That's the kind of person Kyle Kulinski gave the benefit of the doubt to. You all know the other kind of person Kyle Kulinski gave the benefit of the doubt to? Joe Rogan. The guy who's been turning his show into the anti-trans hour for the past 4 or 5 years. Talking about all of these different issues, othering transgender individuals. People who've been promoting folks like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, who are against the gay community, who Joe Rogan purports to love and be a fan of and be such an ally to, but also talk behind their backs and talk shifty, the same way he talks about black people. Okay? There's a certain point, Kyle Kulinski, where you start to realize you're not losing your audience or not growing your audience because of algorithms or because of factors outside of your control. No, some of these are factors inside of your control, Kyle Kulinski. They're the fact that your job is to just pay attention to the news, sit back on your couch in upstate New York in your relatively privileged life, where your job is just talk in front of screens and make YouTube videos all day. This isn't my day job. I have to do other shit and then do this. And like, that's a different struggle that a lot of people have to do, other than Kyle gets to do this for a full-time job because he's lied to people over a decade saying he has the backs of the left. When he doesn't, he only has the backs of his own fame and covering his ass. Kyle Kulinski should have no credibility after this. And just because he makes a groveling, sad video admitting that he was actually wrong about this doesn't change the fact. I'll be fair and I'll continue to like kind of speed through this, but like you'll get the idea. It's just this continued sort of, oh, but why would Joe Rogan possibly be wrong about this? Why would Joe Rogan possibly be for Republicans? Doesn't Joe Rogan possibly understand what being Republicans can mean? Yes. And Joe Rogan doesn't care. And the fact, Kyle, that you can't see that Joe Rogan doesn't care, you like him too much of a friend, and therefore that has colored your political commentary, should be an abdication of what you do. Kyle, when are you going to talk about your integrity? When are you going to talk about the apology you owe to the marginalized groups that you say to be defending? That's nowhere to be found here.
Those people vote Republican.
He makes that move with his eyebrows too. Did you guys notice that? I know I'm analyzing this like the Zapruder film, but look at his face after Aaron Rodgers like starts laughing. Watch what he does with his eyebrows.
Those people vote Republican.
Look at the eyebrows. Huh? Yeah, see? I'm kind of not joking.
That's
right?
what a lot of them are going to do anyway.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, more than 1 million people transferred over to the Republican Party, I think in 2021 alone. Find out what that number is. But, you know, you look at guys like Ron DeSantis who kept...
Okay, hold on. We're going to get to Ron DeSantis in a second. To the argument of, well, 1 million people switched over, right? Okay, that was during the lull of the Biden administration when they were doing absolutely nothing but sitting on their ass all day. That's when 1 million people switched over to the Republican Party. Since then, the Supreme Court, led by Republicans, has overturned Roe versus Wade. So what's happened recently? Women lead surge in new voter registration since Roe overturned. Study, surge in women registering to vote in Pennsylvania since Roe v. Wade overturned. Democrats pull in $80 million following Supreme Court ruling on Roe, and is in PBS. Here's another one. This one's probably the most important, right? So this is during the lull where Republicans were just obliterating Democrats. This is in the generic ballot for the congressional race. So if you just put a generic Republican against a generic Democrat, the numbers were Republicans had a pretty solid lead. There were some polls where they had a double-digit lead, but this is the average of the polls. The Republicans were consistently leading until, oh, look at that. After Roe versus Wade, all of a sudden, boom, now the Democrats are leading. So, I mean, this commentary, if you want to do this commentary, it is stuck perpetually in a pre-Roe versus Wade state. After Roe versus Wade, the political reality has changed now. And it's not just Roe versus Wade, by the way. It's also the fact that it was the Democrats who passed what's called the PACT Act, which is health care for veterans who were poisoned by toxic burn pits. That was Democrats who did that. It was also Democrats who passed the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, which sets a 15% minimum corporate tax rate. In other words, it stops corporations from cheating and paying zero in taxes or getting a net subsidy. It was Democrats who just passed that. That's also another $64 billion towards Obamacare, which gives people health care. It was Democrats who did that. So there's been a number of legislative victories for Biden and the Democrats. In fact, there was even the CHIPS Act, which was a bill to bring back microchip manufacturing to the U.S., which will create a lot of jobs here. And by the way, we are currently onshoring a lot of jobs. So in other words, the political reality from a year ago has absolutely changed. And Democrats have had some victories, and Roe versus Wade was overturned. And so now the argument about, well, 1 million people registered to vote Republican. Okay, but what happened post-Roe? I wouldn't be surprised if that was wiped out and then some.
That number is. But, you know, you look at guys like Ron DeSantis, who kept Florida open and had some pretty reasonable policies in terms of, like, what to do about COVID. And, you know, he mapped it out on television. He was, you know, widely criticized for this, where he was saying, like, we need to protect our elders. We need to, you know, make sure that medical care is available for those people. And everyone else, you should be able to do whatever you want to do and protect your freedom.
Ron DeSantis, protecting your freedom. This Ron DeSantis? DeSantis signs bill ending vehicle driver liability for hitting protesters. Governor Ron DeSantis signed a controversial bill into law
Again,
Monday that diminishes First Amendment speech and protesting rights.
Joe Rogan doesn't care that Ron DeSantis signed a bill that allows you to run into protesters. Joe Rogan and his right-wing buddies are totally fine about this. So while Kyle Kulinski wastes his breath, what's that MF Doom lyric? Running up his mouth, Bill, everybody doubting still. While Kyle Kulinski's running his breath, trying to appeal to Joe Rogan.
That Ron DeSantis is protecting your freedom?
Brother, he's gone.
Florida Governor DeSantis says marijuana should remain criminalized because of its, quote, putrid odor. This Ron DeSantis?
You think Rogan doesn't understand DeSantis is against cannabis and hasn't rolled that in? You think Rogan cares about the $15 minimum wage?
Look, I know that this issue, this specific issue on COVID, was and is super important to Rogan. But he's at the point now where it clouds all of his other policy beliefs. All the other things that
He's at the point now? What about before COVID? Yes, he endorsed Bernie Sanders, but people at the time were saying Joe Rogan's also a transphobe. Like, yeah, there's some appeals to reaching to a brighter audience, or to a broader audience, but we should also be aware of, like, who Joe Rogan courts himself with. These were concerns during 2020, and it's only gotten worse since, of course, COVID and everything. But Joe Rogan had a Republican streak that, again, the most marginalized communities were calling out, and Kyle Kulinski, white ass, Wonder Bread ass Kyle Kulinski, was not paying attention to.
purports to believe in, that he claims to believe in, that he stands by. This guy supports legalizing marijuana. This guy supports free speech in the First Amendment. This guy supports a $15 minimum wage. But he's going to overlook how DeSantis is dead wrong on all of those things because, what? He said let her rip during the pandemic? So that's a more important thing to you than working people getting a raise that they desperately need because they're working poor people. That's more important to you than legalizing marijuana. That's more important to you than free speech. Man, it's just holy shit. Now, again, I mean, you want to talk about the current mood in the country? It is not what Joe just laid out because so many things have happened since Roe versus Wade has been overturned. This is just one example right here. This is in Time magazine. How a 10-year-old rape victim who traveled for an abortion became part of a political fire. So this 10-year-old got raped.
Kyle thinks he's making a good point here.
Wasn't allowed to get abortion interstate.
What he's actually saying is that Joe Rogan has been existing in a world in which he's been able to see that Republicans have been ghouls and menaces. They have been so heavy-handed over the instance of abortion. They are willing to talk over or like deny the idea that a 10-year-old was a rape victim, even though there's all the proof in the world this was the case. Again, Joe Rogan doesn't care about the mounting evidence that the Republicans he supports are terrible people. When he said vote Republican, he said it with his chest. Okay? And even this clip here that he's playing right now, that is basically Joe Rogan saying, oh, well, why does Kamala Harris care about all these jailing things when she jailed people in California when she was governor? Yeah, I've made that point too, okay? But the thing Jimmy Dore does is he will invite over a Boogaloo boy or Proud Boy, find one thing they agree on, and go, boom, Red-Brown Alliance. You see? You can trust Proud Boys. You can trust Boogaloo boys. You can trust white nationalists because I'm bringing the country together. There's so much division. I'm bringing the country together by telling you that me, a fake white leftist, and him, a LARPing right-winger who hates black people and marginalized groups and people of color and LGBTQ plus people and people with disabilities and anyone else who is not fitting their perception of who a perfect person is, we can all get along. So why can't you smarmy leftists on the internet? Again, why is it always Wonder Bread ass white leftists like Jimmy Dore and Kyle Kulinski who convince me that the enemy of me is my friend? That I am actually the asshole for sounding the alarm on people like Joe Rogan being not a friend of the left. People like Jimmy Dore not being a friend of the left. We get called the crazy ones. You get all the views. But actually, this isn't the case. Because, again, as we'll tease in some of the comments here, Kyle Kulinski is getting rolled. Mr. TV says, it's hilarious that this is a gut punch for Kyle when everybody other than him were not shocked by this. Kyle, you may be one of the only people on the planet not even a little surprised by this. Let's be real, most of us knew this already, you just didn't want to accept this. Kyle tried like hell to deny the writing on the wall in this case. Brother Kyle, lots of folks saw this coming. You've been asleep with a reel because of what Rogan has been able to do for you personally instead of holding him to the fire when you had the opportunity. Kyle Kulinski, you dumb bitch, I won. When I said earlier this year that I was sick and tired of people like Kyle Kulinski defending people like Joe Rogan for being on the left when they weren't, I started this warpath because I knew that even if Kyle Kulinski was going to ignore me, his audience would not. This is episode 40 of Power Report. This is 13 episodes ago. This is back in February. And I was making this comment back then about exactly why Joe Rogan is not a part of the left and that he willingly feeds into right-wing talking points. I've definitely talked about this since in other instances where Kyle still has chosen to ignore people within his circle who are warning him about this in favor of continually befriending his boy Joe Rogan. I'm not going to show the DMs, though it's tempting. Oh, it's so tempting to show the DMs. Everything I know he has seen. And yet, he's ignored. Well, guess what? The chickens have come home to roost. And, hey, we're about to end. What you gotta do is play this last moment where Kyle finally realizes that his goose is cooked and that he is wrong and that he is one of the most gullible men in leftist media.
It is that Brittany Griner's in jail. You put
She
people
signed
in
it,
jail.
yeah.
You did. Thousands of people in
Yeah.
jail for marijuana. Yeah, it's crazy.
Hello.
Yeah, and that was what, like the student.
He's right in his criticism of Kamala and Biden. They need to change the scheduling of marijuana next. They need to free the nonviolent drug offenders next. At best, I don't think Biden would legalize it, but I do think there's an outside chance he would decriminalize it, even though he's an
Forest
old-school
for the
1990s
trees,
style
Kyle.
drug warrior.
Forest for the trees.
So he's right about this criticism. But again, I don't know how you can make this point when Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says marijuana should remain criminalized because of its putrid odor.
And why are you saying that again now? Why are you saying, oh, wow, I think Joe Rogan might be carelessly inconsistent in his ideas when we've been saying this for years? Kyle, why did it take you years to realize something that people were telling you with facts for years? Why have you been misleading your audience? Thankfully, your audience has been able to see through one of the most embarrassing failures in left-wing media in 2022, possibly ever, that no one's talking about is Kyle Kulinski misleading his audience and doing a total failure of his job and trying to convince him that Joe Rogan's a good guy. For what? So that he could get on his show again? If there are ever any leftists who sell out their views this shamelessly, send them to me. We'll talk about them on the show. I will run them. I will make their lives miserable. I will make it so they cannot hide from what they're doing, and they either have to confront it and make amends for it, or we run them offline. We make them mentally scarred to touch a computer and go live ever again. Yes, I'm talking about scaring other leftist pundits from getting out of this game. Not by threatening their families or anything like that. Not by doing the stuff that's happening on the right that I just criticized. But making it so that it is a hostile place to be this shitty of a pundit. Kyle Kulinski is not going to hear the last of me until I'm either blocked or he apologizes to his audience for what he has been caught doing.
Again, this is a guy who is not in favor of marijuana, and Joe's acting like, I like him and he's pro-freedom, and I think he's reasonable and I vote for him.
Loan debt forgiveness, that's great. But how come you guys did loan debt forgiveness? That's great. But how?
Okay. Yes, it is great, Joe. It is great, Joe. Thank you for mentioning that. I would like it if he didn't just blow by it, right? But at least he said it was great.
How come you guys didn't exonerate people that were in jail for marijuana when you said you were going to? They said that they were going to make marijuana federally legal. They said they were going to exonerate prisoners who were in jail for nonviolent drug offenses. That's what they said. None of that has happened.
You mean a politician said something they ran on and then didn't actually enact that said policy?
I know.
All right, so there you go. Look, he's right about weed. He's right about the hypocrisy of Biden and Kamala on this front. But I would just ask him, hold this guy to the same standard. Now, I get it. He's not president yet. But Rogan appears to want him to be president.
He won't.
He would crack down.
He won't. Doesn't care. Because Rogan is rich.
Even more than any Democrat would. So, ain't gonna be no freeing nonviolent drug offenders from Ron DeSantis. Ain't gonna be no decriminalization or legalization from Ron DeSantis. So, anyway, there you have it. Look, I like Joe. Joe's a very nice guy. I've been on his podcast however many times, 4 times, something like that. But I don't think there's any denying that as time has gone by, yeah, his rhetoric has gotten more and more conservative. It just has. There's no way Joe Rogan from 2 years ago would have told somebody to, quote, vote Republican. Now, again, he might say it's a joke. Well, it certainly wasn't interpreted as a joke by people in the audience. So, the Joe Rogan of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, he says positive things about Bernie Sanders and says, I want to support Bernie Sanders. That's what he does. He talks about universal health care way more often. Yes, he's still massively anti-woke, but he's also talking about economic issues that matter to people, talking about, civil liberties issues and freedoms issues that matter to people. But this is, quote, vote Republican. It ain't it, Joe. It ain't it, Joe. And it was quite a gut punch watching this. Makes me kind of sad if I'm being honest with you guys.
It only makes you sad, Kyle, because you have not been paying attention. It only makes you sad, Kyle, because you're a privileged little bitch who is friends with Joe Rogan, and as a white male does not have to interact with the actual damage that Joe Rogan and his language and his podcast have been doing for years before Bernie Sanders, during the Trump administration, and after the Trump administration. And why every single time you've come up and fixed your skull to defend thumb-faced Joe Rogan has been spitting in the face and undoing all of the good faith work you have tried to do over the years for the left, to try to speak truth to power, to try to speak for the marginalized, try to speak to power to the afflicted, and all the other stuff you pretend to talk about. Kyle Kulinski, you're nothing more than a grifter. I love the fact your fans have turned on you. I'm going to keep hammering it on you until it is emotionally unwell for you and you apologize for it and you just take a break. Maybe you come back stronger, maybe you come back better, but I want blood for this. I'm not stopping till I see blood. So I was fucking right. And they're the lives of trans folks. They're the lives of marginalized groups, etc., who have been hurt because people like Kyle Kulinski perpetuate the idea that freaks and maniacs like Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan are actually our friends. Kyle Kulinski is as gullible. Kyle Kulinski is as gullible as Dave Rubin. Not as dumb, but just as gullible and about as dangerous. Fucking fix yourself, Buzzcut. Let this be a warning the next time anyone on the left, even my friends, even my so-called friends, gets out of line. That's how we do it on Power Report. No one's safe. Republicans get the smoke. Democrats get the smoke. Lefties, who I used to work with, who I have photos with, get the fucking smoke. Because this is about power and who has it and who wields it and who doesn't have it and why the world is burning because we've been playing this game for too long. We're breaking the cycle. We're going to do something better from it. You can find Power Report on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter at Power Report WRLD. Instagram at powerreport.world. Follow me on TikTok at Dan from the Internet. Instagram at Dan from the Internet. Twitch on Dan from the Web. Twitter at Dan from the Web. Powerreport.world. Powerreport.world for all of the links to listen to the show as a podcast. YouTube.com/Dan from the Internet is where you'll get all the clips. And you know Warpath Dan is your favorite. You know it. You love it.